All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the July 6th, 2026 Planning Board meeting. Uh, Noting a quorum of the Planning Board, I will commence the meeting at 7:07. We'll do a roll call for presence. As I see you, Chris Dowdy,
Dowdy present.
Mark White,
White present.
Gazzardi present. And I do know that member Gary Kushner is going to be a little bit late this evening, and I'm not sure on member Werner, but I've pinged her, so we'll see how that goes. Okay, so first thing on the agenda is I'm going to offer some time to take public comment on items that aren't listed in our agenda. So if anybody from the public has a comment, please do try to limit your comment to 2 minutes for anything that is not on the agenda. No? Okay, seeing no hands or comments, move right into the agenda. What you'll notice is in working the agenda out with Alec, I've come up with notional times for each item. And then an indication as to what the agenda item is. Is it a decision? Is it a discussion? Is it an update? And so the intent is just to know that if we have a decision to make, then that's what we're focused on. If it's just a discussion, that's what it is. The times, as much as I'd like to stick to them, they are notional. My intent is not to cut out important discussion, but it is an attempt to try to focus us and move us along when appropriate. First item under general business, start for 7:10, minor modification request, special permit for the park at Beaverbrook. We do have that as a decision item. Alec, if you could present what it is that we're being asked to decide on.
Absolutely. So as members of the board and members of the public may remember, we've had a couple discussions regarding this item. We have previously modified the decision, so this is minor modification number 2, but this is directly in regards to condition number 4 and condition number 6 of your special permit decision rendered earlier this year. I'll note for the public that the original decision, a request letter, and 2 revised site plans are included in the board's packet, linked via Dropbox if you'd like to follow along. I'll also share my screen at certain points. The applicant, after much discussion back and forth, after working with me and the municipal team behind the scenes that are facilitating the conservation restriction and the declaration of restriction, we've come to a recommendation regarding those lots in question. As we had discussed in your previous meeting, a portion of the land meant to go into conservation is in the town of Harvard and is therefore outside the purview of the Boxborough Conservation Commission. They would be unable to hold a conservation restriction on land that's outside the town of Boxborough, and so it created an impediment in how we could interpret and execute those conditions. I will note that just a couple weeks ago, Attorney Costa did authorize the recording of the declaration of restriction, which had previously been provided on 2 occasions in draft format. So that is working its way through right now. That should be up and recorded at the Registry of Deeds within the next day or 2. They did have some recent turnover at the Campanelli team, so just kind of coordinating with them and getting in touch with some new individuals to move that one along. However, the outstanding item is still the interpretation. So as the original conditions read, it included all the land, including the land in Harvard. I'll bring up my screen share so you can see. That includes these small slivers of land shown on the site plan. And as a team, myself, the Sudbury Valley trustees, the chair of the Conservation Commission, we are all recommending, as is the applicant, that we exclude those small slivers of land. Now, that is a minor loss of land that's meant to go into conservation. Of course, we think about conservation land as a total numbers game. How many acres are we putting into conservation? We always hate to see a little bit go. But in addition, we have some good news. When they were doing the survey work of open space area D, or as shown as CR area 1 here, it actually came back about 3 acres larger than originally anticipated. So we're actually getting more land than we're losing here, which is always a big win. We'll happily take it. And as every member of the team will tell you, the land in question in Harvard, these little slivers just present too much of a challenge. Frankly, they're also littered with utility poles, things that create an impediment as we're developing a formal conservation restriction. They add all these extra elements. So removing these from the equation is actually overall pretty beneficial. It doesn't just, get the issue out of the room, but it also makes it a little bit easier when we go to enforce conservation restrictions in the future. And so the net on this and the request from the applicant is to interpret both condition 4, which addresses the declaration of restriction, and condition 6, which addresses the final conservation restriction, to only extend to these lots in question. Lot CR Area 1, as we're now calling it, CR Area 2, and CR Area 3, as shown in these 2 site plans. I'll pull down my screen share if the board has any questions, and I do have a recommended motion.
Any questions from board members?
So what exactly were we being asked to approve in what manner?
So Rich, you would be seeking a motion to modify conditions 4 and 6 of the open space commercial development special permit to extend only to CR Area 1, CR Area 2, and CR Area 3 as presented. That motion constitutes a minor modification of your decision and allows us to move forward, and it allows the applicant to proceed with their plans for development, as well as the current condition language is ultimately unenforceable in our opinion. I will also note we did reach out, board member Werner's not here at the moment, but she did ask last we discussed this, that we reach out to the town of Harvard. We did do so. Ian had that communication. Ultimately, we had a brief discussion and then nothing ever came of it. The town of Harvard, their conservation agent, their commission, no one expressed any further interest at that point. The total acreage of this land is less than 1/10 of an acre by our calculation, so it just didn't seem very appealing is our understanding.
All right, so that's the motion. Chris, I'm sorry, did you have a comment?
Nope, sorry.
So if that's the motion, I guess I'll take one if that's the motion you're looking for.
You want me to reread it? Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, moved by Mark. Chris, seconded by Chris Dowdy. So discussion on the motion. Alec, you answered the question I had, which was what was the give back? And it sounds like it's less than 1/10 of an acre. It's restricted utility poles. I just wanted to make sure that, so the way the motion reads, and I think Mark was asking this question, how do we invoke this? So basically this motion amends the condition and it reflects a new map, right? Is that?
Yes, that's correct. These 2 conditions will now only extend to these maps in question, and they'll go on file as new exhibits.
Okay, did the motion indicate the revision to the map or something? Because this is a different map than what we had before, right?
The language of it is to extend only to CR Area 1, CR Area 2, and CR Area 3 as presented. And these are the CR area maps as they've been presented.
Okay, all right. So you've answered my question. Any other discussion on the motion? Any questions from anybody in the public? Okay. All right. Guess we'll take a vote. As I see you, Chris Dowdy.
Dowdy, aye.
Mark White.
White eye.
And Gazzardi, aye. Motion carries 3-0. Okay. All right. So on to agenda item 2, 720, MBTA Communities Revision Alternatives. This is a discussion. Alec, so I spoke with Alec and he's put together, or at least has come up with, a couple of alternatives for us to talk through. This is a discussion. We're not going to make a decision tonight, but I think it's important that we get some discussion going, because this is something we're going to need to take to town meeting, I believe, this fall. Alec, that's yeah.
That's
okay.
correct, yes.
Okay, Alec, floor is yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Rich. So as the board will remember, we did discuss at a previous meeting, a few meetings ago now, that there is a deficiency in our existing MBTA communities overlay district. The very complex Excel spreadsheet, which does all these calculations for you, spits back out your compliance number. It ultimately broke during our pre-compliance testing, and it was only identified after final submission and far after the date of approval at town meeting, that it was miscalculating these items. As discussed, we remain in a state of interim compliance. There are no penalties to the town of Boxborough so long as we continue to make effort to improve and ultimately to fix the error in the district. So we're still in great shape. There's been no damage done. There's no challenge to any of our existing or any of our proposed grant applications. We're in good shape at the moment. But the proposal will need to bring our overall density count to 15 units per acre. As you may remember, the state mandated through its acts that you must develop a multifamily housing zoning district. I shouldn't use the term develop. You must draft a multifamily housing district that reaches a net density of 15 units per acre once you exclude for things like right-of-ways, septic, things that are undevelopable. Wetlands is another example. Our district followed a methodology called paper compliance, in which we used land which has multifamily housing on it today, a mix of densities, one area that is more dense and one area that is a little less dense. But as we developed it and calculated it, we believed it would comply at 15 units per acre as drafted. The existing district is more dense than that, but the unit count doesn't add up. So the two approaches I put forward, I developed an alternative 1 and an alternative 2. Alternative 1 is a paper compliance model, and it continues to be paper compliance, in which we do not zone land that is readily developable, but the land itself can still count. That method is by simply adjusting the language within the written bylaw from 13 units per acre to 17 units per acre. That's specifically section 8.5.6. I'll bring up my screen share so you can follow along.
Yeah, that'd be helpful, Alec. Thank you.
Yep.
So right now we're at 13. What is the calc showing us at today?
Oh, bear with me 1 second on my other screen. Let me just adjust this back down and I can tell you that. Sorry if my picture gets a little wonky there. I have to make an edit on the fly so that it will. All right. Our total district density comes out to 12.1 units per acre,
Okay.
which is well below the required 15 units per acre.
Okay.
That being said, this approach, alternative 1, by simply raising the number to 17 units per acre without including any additional or developable land, that ultimately brings us to a higher density threshold. I'm going to switch my screen share so that you can now see. Fair warning, this is a complex spreadsheet. It's going to be a lot of jargon, so just follow along with me. If I go in here to the parameters and I change this value, maximum dwelling units per acre, that's what's written in your bylaw, to 17, it then spits out a DUAC of 15.7. That's the important number right there. So that gets you over your 15 units per acre, and it even gives you a 0.7 in case there's any other little bit of a hiccup. Previously, when this Excel spreadsheet broke, this continued to read over 15 units per acre. We have since corrected that, and as I just did behind the scenes, I changed the number again. It went down below 15. I just changed it to 17, and it went back up.
So I think what you're saying is you validated that the spreadsheet is working.
Yes, I have revalidated this 3 times over, and we will also talk to our consultant once the board starts deciding the direction they want to go so that they can run it themselves separately and rebuild it from the ground up. So, yes,
okay.
We're quadruple checking at this point.
Questions from the board on alternative 1, paper compliance?
Not yet. I want to hear all of it.
Okay. All right, keep going, Alec.
All right, and then alternative two takes a different approach. Alternative two is based in part on feedback that we received during the town meeting and post adoption. And alternative two takes an approach that could more readily lead to active development. Alternative two incorporates a map revision. Alternative two showing this land in green by folding this additional single family house lot into our overall district. You would still have to raise the language of the district as written. However, you would only have to raise that to 15 units per acre. So you can all see the second district shown, but then when I jump over to alternative two, you'll see I've only raised that to 15 units per acre. So this is a flat 15 units per acre. I'll note that this is probably more easy for everyone to understand. We had to be 15 units per acre. This is written as 15 units per acre. And with the inclusion of this parcel, it gets us over 15 units per acre. And I'll also demonstrate real quick, just jumping over to alternative two, the expanded district. You'll see I've subbed out the 17 units per acre to 15 under maximum dwelling unit per acre. And that gets us to 15.9 DU over AC. So once again, that gets you over compliance. I will note things are a tiny bit trickier when including this lot. For example, their septic system, a small fraction of the acreage of land would not count, but this 0.9 density unit that we are over 15 gives us that flexibility that even when we exclude that tiny portion of land, it will still comply. And I will note too, what I had to do to run this equation is I had to actually add the lot. So you'll see I've included here the 1178 Hill Road lot into our district, and I've included the parcel acres. As I noted, we don't know the exact acreage. It's minute of the septic system. We're talking 100 to 200 square feet. So a very minor amount that would go into the equation, but still landing at 0.9 over our required amount.
And that assumes a single home on that parcel, or no?
Yes. So today there is a single family home. This parcel had been included in original discussions, and I'll flip my screen back over just to the map. This parcel had been included in the original proposed district that came out of the advisory group. This parcel would be more readily developable. Ultimately, it would fall to the single family homeowner, whether they choose to develop or not, whether they choose to sell to a developer or not. However, at the 15 units per acre, as we'd have it written, this could very quickly become 15 units per housing if the homeowner chose to. Initial discussion, or I should say discussion through a second person, so it was discussion through another individual, indicated that the homeowners at that time last year were not interested in building or selling. There was no immediate interest. They have family members or children in the school system, so they're here for at least the medium term, but this would give them that second option in the future.
Okay, Chris Dowdy.
Yeah. So, if I remember correctly, I think the parcel behind that one. So what? 213 zeros? No. So that's the little orange one, right? But the big yellow one that's behind the green there, was that whole piece? I think was originally considered because that is the same owner as the single family house.
Yes, it was originally considered. That land is obviously much larger. It is also split down the middle with wetlands, so it poses a challenge, but the front half would also be developable if the board chose to include that.
Okay. Yeah, because so I guess I like the 15. So of the two options on the table, I like the one that adds a little bit of space with the potential for that 15.9 just in case something in the spreadsheet still doing the math wrong. It gives us more cushion, and it covers less than I was willing to consider anyway. Because I'm still kind of thinking that whole block as viable if we wanted to do something. So that the option 2 sounds good to me. I think it's easy to position if this needs to go to town meeting to amend it as well, because it's just adding on a little piece. Because I think if I remember correctly, most of the pushback that I recall was we didn't add enough that could potentially actually be developed. So
that was the feedback I've received offline and that I recall from the floor as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Any other comments on this one?
No, I think we have them both, so now let's kind of talk about them in comparison to one another, I guess. I mean,
Go ahead, Mark.
alternative 1 is, for me, simpler to wrap my head around because it really doesn't change anything aside from the number of units allowed per acre. So the first one fixes the number without changing the land, and the second one fixes the number by changing the land and the number. And so we've already approved a parcel of land. There was some minor pushback on the idea of a paper versus a actually buildable parcel. But again, I mean, I have to, remind everybody that this was imposed upon us by the state, no warning, not much warning. A one-size-fits-all solution to a regional housing program where Boxborough is already technically in compliance with a lot of it because all of our apartment buildings, which represent 40% of our population, already are considered affordable housing, basically, other than it's not deed restricted. So the paper compliance was a way to stave off the ramifications of not complying in a more full way, which I'm pretty sure the state will come back and tell us that we're going to have to do eventually anyway. So it buys us a little bit of time. And again, it's in the right. I believe it's in the right place. It's as close as we can get to the MBTA station, which is exactly what triggered this whole thing in the first place. So I guess I'm in favor of alternative 1, increasing the density by a small amount. We haven't changed anything else. We haven't changed, the parking regulations or anything. And then I think it's an easier lift for town meeting because it's basically saying we're just talking about the same properties we talked about before. Nothing there has really changed dramatically other than the numbers that we used to calculate it had to be lifted up from 15 to 17. I think that's an easy swallow for everybody and probably the most prudent way forward for the time being. So that's all I got to say.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. I guess I'll ask a question, Chris. I don't know if Chris has a comment, but Alec, what is if you go to 17 from, what do we have on the book today? 13, you go up to 17. So you're going up 4 units. What does that look like in terms of the front? Because the back parcel's pretty much fully developed with more condominiums, a very high density, 2 large buildings, I think, 2 large buildings. But the front buildings seem to be more imminently midterm, I'll say in the medium range, developable. What does that look like? Because I know we spent a little bit of time fussing over setbacks and building height. Does this change that? Because at the end of the day, it's still 15, right? When you do all the math, when you come right down, it's 15.4, whatever the fraction was.
Yeah. So the way this works, and remember, that's a calculated number. So say one of these, we used to call them the fingerlings, which each one is about 0.95 acres. So it's just
Mhm.
under 1 full acre. So we're going to say that you could build the number written in the bylaw -1. Let's just call it that for fraction's sake without doing the math out. So if we revise this to say 17 units per acre, as it's written in the bylaw, that property owner, if they chose to tear down and rebuild, or they chose to expand their existing structure and footprint, they could go up to, let's call it 16 units per acre, and that would be a net density increase of 10 units on the original parcel. So you do that times four, because there's four fingerlings here. That could get you to up to 40 new units of housing. I still uphold to this day the likelihood of Meanmore ever turning over is very slim to none. I'm calling it none because as I read through their condominium agreement, it would take 75% of all owners simultaneously agreeing to sell in order for that to ever happen.
So
Yes.
the fingerlings are 6-unit buildings right now? I thought they were 12 for some reason. I might
No,
just
each fingerling is a 6-unit building.
Okay. I'm probably thinking that because most of the condos like in Brook Village, all those little rectangles, those I think are all 12s. So
Yep.
okay.
So if you go up to 16 units, a combination of 1 and 2 bedroom, I mean, can you eat like that's less than an acre? You're gonna put 16 units in there with a well and a septic. How's that work?
It gets pretty limiting. The likelihood that someone could squeeze all 16 units out of that less than an acre parcel, it gets pretty challenging. They would also be constrained by septic requirements and Title V. So I can't guarantee that even that would go forward by current state standards, but from a sheer density standpoint, that's what it'll allow. I will also remind everybody, we do get the question regarding water consumption, obviously with Boxborough being a predominantly well-water community. Wells running dry is always a concern. As a reminder, Leonard Road or Meadmore Condominiums has public water supply immediately available to it via Littleton, and we might be able to tie in the future should there be any up density or up zoning in this case.
Yeah, I think the way I could visualize it with the fingerlings, if those current buildings are 6 and you wanted to get closer to 16, you'd probably, instead of that one building that's parallel to the street, you'd drop that, go back a little bit, and put a pair of buildings that are now perpendicular to the street with like a little parking lot or something in the middle. And those two buildings would both be slightly longer than the current ones. So you could probably have a 7 and 7 or an 8 and 8 if you wanted to actually hit 16. Might not fit though.
Yeah. A highlight for the board when we discussed this last year, preliminary investigation netted that the highest build out potential on the fingerlings would be only if all 4 fingerlings were acquired by the same owner for complete redevelopment. There are 3 property owners amongst the 4 parcels. One owner owns 2 buildings and the other 2 buildings are individually owned. In speaking with those 2 individual owners, they have no intent to sell. They're happy with the status quo, and at this time they don't feel the need or interest in investing in the property further, or at least not to the extent of upzoning or building up even under today's standards. I have checked in with both of those property owners since this language was updated, and that remains the case. They're just not interested right now in building more units.
Yeah, I mean, and to where Mark was going, right? In my mind, simplicity is okay, you bring it up to 17. I guess the question is if somebody were really coming forward and trying to up each lot by 10 or do a partial or, that's a lot. And I understand there's the septic and the well, there's a lot of constraints. So I'm not sure what actually can happen. Our job isn't to do the engineering to figure that out. That's for the landowners to figure out. But let's assume it all works. I guess it's not clear to me that that's something that I don't know if that's would be the preferred choice right on Hill Road. I don't know. So I think having a couple of alternatives for us to discuss is good. The second alternative, so the first one's easy. We could do that, and there's a number of constraints, and it's unclear what actually happens. So it brings us back to our original intent, right? Which was that's the parcel and paper compliance, if that's what you want to call it. But I do believe those, even though the owners today say no, like I do believe that's more developable than the back. The other option is you look at adding a parcel, and okay, so that is some of the feedback, right? Some people were like, well, why don't we add more land? Why don't we actually provide an opportunity? And the way to do that is to add another parcel. Now, I don't know if adding that one single family home really changes the game much. It makes the compliance a little bit easier on Hill Road, so that might be viable. But then the question becomes, if we're going to add more land, why wouldn't we be putting the land in the back on the table? Because that was the feedback, like, add more land. I know we also got feedback during the hearing that like, why are you promoting all this development at the top of Hill Road? Because of traffic. So this is not a decision meeting. We have to have a hearing on this, right? So we have to bring something to a hearing. And I guess maybe that's the one sort of half decision we need to make is what are our next steps on this? And if, Alec, can you just put that map back up before we
Yep.
jump to next steps?
Happy to do so. I will also remind everybody too, we haven't discussed it because the alternatives presented are regarding land calculations and language changes. I will note there's an additional language change that I would recommend we make. Namely, you received an economic feasibility analysis as a part of your original project. And that EFA came back saying that you could require 20% of any new units in this district, expanded or otherwise, be deed restricted as affordable. And so a reminder that as we're considering whether it's raising the threshold to 17 and these fingerlings or raising the threshold to 15 and this more readily developable parcel, any of those new units created, and if these were removed to make way for a new unit, all of the units created, those would all be applied to that threshold. So for reference, for every 5 new units created, 1 new unit would go on your subsidized housing inventory and get you further away from that 10% threshold that you are just slightly above today.
Okay. The yellow coloring, it says town of Boxborough in the key, but I know that's not true, right? Because everything else is not town of Boxborough.
Yeah, I don't know why it's coded that way. Apologies.
Okay. No, that's okay. But so we got that lot behind the green lot, the alternative. That what's across the street? You've got, directly across from 003,000, and then directly across from 004,000. What lots are these? Are they?
I'm going to bring up
the GIS. Yeah, I think the pointy bit is that the one right behind Liberty Field.
I'm going to do you one better. I'm actually just outright going to bring up Google Maps so we can look. It's predominantly single family house lots, but then also a wooded lot. So bear with me. I'm going to flip
I guess
over.
where I'm going is any of that industrial commercial land on the other side.
All right. So for reference, this is 1178 Hill Road, the single family home lot. And then you get to these fingerlings here.
Yeah.
And then if I drop us right there, you get the fingerlings and you get a densely wooded lot. And this land itself backs up into to Liberty Field for reference.
Can you jump across the street, or is that?
You mean jump across to Liberty Square Road?
No, jump across Hill Road. In other words, is that now not a contiguous parcel? If you were
Oh, as far as the district goes, yes,
Yeah.
you can jump across. The roadway itself presents a little bit of a decrease to your calculation, but it's not something it's something we can totally account for, especially if we're adding unbuilt land. As a reminder, municipally owned land, unless it's owned by a housing board or affordable housing trust, does not qualify unless the town is prepared to sign an agreement that they intend to develop housing in an immediate term. So, for example, if one of those parcels in question, one of the parcels you were to include, and then it turns out that's owned by the town without having that data immediately in front of me, we would have to sign on to immediate growth in the district.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I guess it's really, so where do we go from here? How do we do this? Because we're not making a decision, but we want to get to a hearing. Do we go to a hearing with alternatives?
If I was to make a recommendation, yes, I think you should go into a hearing with alternatives. We need a few weeks to notice a public hearing anyways, so I think we could continue this discussion on the August 3rd or we could continue this discussion on July 20th. We could invite members of the public to attend specifically to talk about this, encourage a little early engagement, and then I can reach out to the property owner on the potential parcel in question. I can invite them to attend August 3rd, and August 3rd we could also notice a public hearing for. So you could have one more working session to discuss this, and then a public hearing date at that point, more than a month in advance of your deadline to get final language. Start hashing this out really there, going back and forth. But two different opportunities, one noticed in the paper and the other just readily available to people in 2 weeks.
Okay. All right, so the hearing would be what date?
I would recommend August 3rd, 2026. That is a regularly scheduled meeting of the planning board.
All right, so we would meet on the 20th. You'd have the two alternatives. We'd sketch out language, or you'd have language sketched out for that meeting. And then but in the meantime, you would have noticed the meeting on the 3rd, and then we're in a public hearing in 2 weeks. We're in a public hearing August 3rd. Yeah, does August 3rd work, Mark, Chris, for a hearing? Can you guys here around? I know we already went through our schedule, so it's a regularly scheduled meeting.
Yeah, sure. I mean, sure. I like the idea of having inviting public comment on the just tweaking paper compliance. It's the simplest to be okay for now, or do we really want to add a chunk? And if so, this tiny chunk or more.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't be going across the street yet. If any, yeah, I'd go for either the option 2 or the option 2 plus the rest of that lot that we were originally considering. Kind of those being the things just to get feedback for. Or do people just want it done? Because, essentially erasing one number, erasing 13 and penciling in 17 kind of solves it. That is the simplest.
Yeah. All right, Mark, how are you on 2 options to a public hearing?
Well, again, I think, the First Amendment, it's not a policy shift. So it's not a heavy lift. We've already talked about the policy. It's just a technical correction to the district that was previously approved by town meeting. So it keeps everything the same except for this one number. And it doesn't open up the proverbial can of worms again. Okay. You're trying to now make more changes to it when the whole idea was, let's just comply now, and then we can always change it later. There's nothing that prevents us from coming back with new information or a new will of the town that says we need to do something, because the housing board is still doing their housing production plan. They're still looking at Stowe Road. So the whole housing issue in Boxborough is still up in the air. And to start trying to take substantive measures to add to the district physically, I think I don't want to do it. But if this board decides to put two options in front of the town, then I guess I won't vote no, because I do believe in giving the town options. But in this one, it's not like the first go round. The first go round, definitely we needed options. This go round came to us as exactly as a fix. This is a fix. Something got messed up. The spreadsheet didn't work. We got to look at it again. And so I feel a lot more comfortable just doing that. So, I mean, that's how I feel. I mean, if you guys all feel differently, then I'll ride with you. But I think there's plenty of time for us to muck around with this later. Plenty of time.
Yeah, that's good input. Alec, what would we be noticing? Just that we're going to have a public hearing to revisit our MBTA communities district, and you state the district numbers, or would you have to, if we were including other land, would you have to include that in the notice?
I would notice it pretty generically. I would just include revisions to section 8.6, the MBTA Community Overlay District, and revisions to Appendix B, the Boxborough zoning map, without declaring specific parcels. You don't have to do that in the notice itself, and that would give you full flexibility. Whether you consider, I mean, you could consider no amendment to the map, but still it's noticed, so that way the option's on the table if the will of the people's there and you choose to pursue it.
Yeah.
You don't have to be too descriptive in this.
Okay. All right. Chris, anything else?
No, I think I'm good here.
And do we have 302? Is that Gary by any chance?
Oh, the cell phone?
Yeah.
I don't think I have his number. Maybe I do.
I have prompted the number to unmute, but it is harder to do on a phone, at least in my opinion.
Okay.
I'm a screen guy.
Yeah.
So Gary Kushner, if you're there, if you could identify yourself, that'd be great. Okay, so all right, so what do we need? A motion to hold a public hearing to revisit what's the motion we need, Alec?
So I would recommend seeking a motion to schedule a public hearing for August 3rd, 2026 at 7 p.m.
So moved. Or 7:10.
7:10. Yeah,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, it's Gary.
Gary,
Hey,
okay.
I'm finally
Gary.
in.
Thank you, Gary. All right, let's
Yeah,
acknowledge Gary. Gary's present as of 10 minutes to as of 7:50. Gary, I don't know if you.
So reality, I've been on the phone since 7, by the way,
Oh,
in case that matters.
He's been the phone number that we didn't.
I didn't get your presence acknowledged. All right. So you've heard the discussion. Any thoughts or comments on this?
So yes, I'm okay with going to 2 for the public hearing, but personally I support the first, which seems to be the easiest to bring to town meeting.
Okay.
Less confusing, I think.
Well,
So anyways, that's my opinion.
I think if so, the motion is we got a motion on the table to hold a public hearing. Is there a second on that?
Second.
All right. So Chris Dowdy motion, Mark White seconded. Okay. So now we're discussing the motion. So like Alec, I think you can bring an amendment that basically says we're changing the number. We're going to 17. Everything else remains the same. That's like step 1. Then you can have like a side piece that says, look, if we did want to expand, this is what that language would look like. But I think, what Mark White commented on sort of resonates is that we already had a policy decision, right? This is a correction. And we always have the right to go back and continue to amend as we see fit. So that is an appealing thought. So if we, at least let's have like we can have that as a primary if we so want to call it that or whatever, that's option 1. And then we can have the second alternative to have to get feedback on, and then at least we've got something in writing. And we can look at that at the next meeting as a very short agenda topic, and then we can move on from there. From my perspective. Any other discussion on this? All right, I'll take a roll call vote as I see you. Chris Dowdy.
Dowdy, aye.
Mark White.
White eye.
Gary Kushner.
Kushner, aye.
And Gazzardi, aye. Okay, great. Okay, next topic, 750. Fire Station Building Committee update. This is Alec is going to update us and allow some time for a short discussion.
Yep. All right, thank you, Rich. So as an update for the board, just prior to the turn of the fiscal year, Rich and I began a discussion about the upcoming and assumed submission of a site plan approval and likely other applications before the planning board. Those are expected sometime this fall to early winter. And as such, there is an interest in making sure we stay on track and that the project stays on track. Obviously, your filing dates, your public hearing requirements, your appeals periods, those all factor into the ultimate terminal date where they can put the project out to bid, get their numbers back, and have a final number ready for town meeting. The Fire Station Building Committee meets on a very frequent basis. They do a fantastic amount of public engagement, and they also, a subset, one member, I believe the chairperson, and a couple members of the consulting team meet separately as well to ensure that they're staying prepared for meetings and that filings are upcoming for their meeting dates. I intend to, and I've been asked to attend those working session meetings to make sure that we stay on track, to help them through the submission process, make sure that you receive a complete filing, a timely filing, and that you have the ability to render a decision within the 65-day requirement. That's my recommendation back to you as well. And ideally, I would like to ensure that you have at least 3 public hearing dates when you can review and ultimately render a decision on this potential and expected submission. I did attend a meeting of the working group just last week. It was productive. We started working on a timeline, and a member of the consulting team and myself will be meeting to go over dates and expected filings based on your meeting calendar, which you remember you did set at your last meeting. That was very helpful and appreciated because it allows us to frame this out and make sure that filings are made in a timely way. Additionally, I did discuss with the team whether they would like to take advantage of a preliminary submission. Your site plan approval rules and regs do offer the opportunity for an applicant to submit ahead of their final application a reduced package for review and preliminary feedback. I would put very strong guardrails up as to the kinds of comments you can make. However, it would give you an early insight and ability to weigh in on the submission, provide any feedback on additional information you need, and it would allow the applicant to give a robust public presentation to you, the board, in a very public setting. So another engagement session in and of itself. I expect we could do something like that at one of your September meetings. And so that's my number one thing to report, that you should expect a preliminary filing sometime at the end of this summer or early fall, so that we can get something on the books and you can get an early crack at this. Simultaneously, I'm also recommending to the Fire Station Building Committee that they take part in what's called a pre-development meeting, by which their engineer and architecture team would meet with myself, department heads, and Sue Carter, your peer review engineer, in advance of the hearing, so that we can provide very detailed feedback. It helps refine the project before it even makes it to the table for your review, and make sure that you get a more complete submission, and it makes sure that the project is submitted in a truly safe and appropriate manner. So those are the initial feedback. As always, the Fire Station Building Committee continues to do a robust amount of public engagement. As a planner who does a lot of public engagement, I've constantly commended them, and I continue to do it. Just the sheer volume of outreach they're doing, the different methods. They're doing a fantastic job. They're knocking on doors. They're getting people out. The last time I was in the building for one of their sessions, they had a great amount of participation again, which was very exciting to see. And I know they have another session coming up this month. If you go to the website, we do have a flyer advertising that if you would like to participate in the design process of the structure. But for you, the board members, I would anticipate preliminary filings as early as this fall, and public hearings going from fall into the winter.
So the site plan app. So I appreciate all the input on the you coordinating, putting it. So you're going to bring back a schedule. Is that the plan to bring back?
Yes. Yes, for your next meeting, I intend to have a preliminary filing schedule. It'll ultimately be on them as the applicant to meet those deadlines, but I will have a preliminary schedule mapped out.
Okay, and you're saying that if they were open to a pre-filing meeting, that would be in the late September, early fall timeframe.
Yes, I would expect so. And then their formal submission would likely come within 2 to 3 weeks of that.
Okay. All right. Great. Any questions?
Can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, Alex, I guess it's for you. I know there's a problem with the title of the property. Is any of that issues going to impact the planning board?
I'm not fully up to date on the title of the property. My understanding is that it's moving forward, and we're continuing that direction. What I will say, though, is that until the town secures ownership, the town would feasibly be unable to file for site plan approval. Alternatively, if they did not own the parcel at the time of submission, the property owner could sign off on the application. But whenever a municipality files an application, I do recommend that we first seek ownership.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the fire station and Alex engagement and the timeline process? Okay, no. So Alec, you'll bring back a timeline at the next meeting. And this is something that you will have shared with their consultant and the working group?
Yes, I'm going to work directly with one of the engineers in developing the timeline. He has their design, engineering, and bid timeline on hand. He's working on that simultaneously. We have since developed your meeting calendar, and so now we can align those two to make sure that you get 3 bites at the apple, so to speak, or 3 public hearings to review.
And I personally committed during the League of Women Voters event that I would be open to additional planning board meetings. So I think that's something that the board can decide on if need be. Not that we should be planning to get it so tight that we're going to have to, meet, every week, but, because it takes time after a meeting, people have to go back, make changes to the drawing, come back. I mean, hopefully a lot of this can get pre-coordinated with your involvement and some of the pre-coordination meetings, but I think there's an element of flexibility we've got to be able to drive into this.
Yeah. I will also highlight for the board and for members of the public, I know that there might be some level of concern as the additional engagement that I'm giving to then presumably review the project. I will note that the intent, as you'll hear during my planner's report, is to continue developing Ian as a planner further, by which he would handle the facilitation of this application and the administrative process of presenting it to the board, and having the filing and then doing the liaising between the board and the applicant. So do rest assured that there is that extra layer of protection to guarantee that as I'm attending these meetings, I'm not biasing myself to the review that I would present you.
Okay, great. Anything else on Fire Station Building Committee?
That is all I have at this time. I'll just reiterate, there is another engagement session upcoming. I don't have that date off the top of my head, but if you go to the website, the flyer is listed on the front page.
Okay. Thank you, Alec. Members, anything else? All right, let's move on to item 810, future articles for consideration. And as part of this item, I included 2 sub items. Number 1, goal setting, which is really part of planning board strategy, and then upcoming public hearings, which we need to make a decision on, because if we don't necessarily need to make a decision tonight, other than the one where we just decided on MBTA communities, but if there if there are specific things that we want to bring forward in the fall, then we need to have a public hearing scheduled pretty soon to get on that, ahead of that cycle, or keep up with that cycle, I should say. But in the last meeting we had, we talked about sort of being gerbils on the gerbil wheel, right? Constantly running from annual town meeting to special town meeting to annual town meeting, and barely having enough time in a 6-month cycle to get whatever articles we're bringing forward and on top of applications, et cetera. So I do want to talk about future articles for consideration, but I put it in the context of, having a goal setting discussion. I've got on the agenda from 8:10 to 8:50. We don't need to knock this ball out of the park tonight, but I would like to at least get alignment by the board, as to how we want to go about this, right? We do need to make some near-term decisions on specific things that we feel we need to bring forward for the fall. And at the same time, I would like we did it last year, I'd like to do it again and have a true planning discussion around, and what I asked Alec to put into the packet are the specific goals and objectives that the planning board has in our master plan, and the goals and objectives that the planning board is support on in our master plan. Because frankly, some of those things, are still on the table, and we ought to discuss whether those are still priorities, and if they are, we ought to be getting them on our radar screen and driving them to some town meeting. The other thing I put on the table is the zoning audit that was done, which was really done for the purpose of the recodification of the zoning bylaw, which occurred. A prior board brought to town meeting, got some amount of money to hire Barrett. They went and they did an assessment. The zoning bylaw has been recodified. So we've kind of moved beyond that. But in that zoning audit, the auditors or the consultants identified certain things that the town should consider, some of which are part of our master plan, some of which may not be, but they were things that were put forward. So I had Alec add that to the packet as well. And my hope is to begin to talk tonight about how we want to go about this, but then to have a real true goal planning session that would take up a chunk of one of our meetings, or a separate meeting if we needed to, but I don't foresee that right now in the summer. So anyway, that's this topic. I'll pause there for a moment and get any comments, and then maybe Alec, I don't know if there's something we want to put on the screen to talk through, but I'll pause for a moment before I say what we do next, in case anybody wants to comment or add anything.
Yeah, I do like the idea of, especially with the articles for consideration, there's things that I'd like to see done on there, but it would help to have that realistic scale of what can we realistically get done in time for this meeting, for that meeting, just so we know how to pace it. Because we might be thinking there's already too much for fall. So it's like, okay, this should actually be next spring. And then if it's next spring, how do we want to pace that so we can nibble away at it? We might need to have a session where we throw everything up on a sheet and just kind of just pick which ones we want in almost a like prioritization order. Like what things need to actually be fall, what things do we want, but they could be spring, that's fine, and then kind of sort to figure out how much time we have.
Okay.
That's how I felt about it. I mean,
Yeah.
Again, that's the goal setting aspect as well. Is like, first you got to develop a list. I mean, it was interesting that you brought the audit back. I already forgotten about it, and we shouldn't, because there was some good stuff in there. I mean, as we went through that, we were supposedly taking notes for things to circle back to later on, and we never really got a chance to do that. And there were some gems in there. So I'm glad you brought that back up. And I think if we decide to start like a whiteboard and say, well, okay, what are our guiding documents? I mean, again, the master plan becomes the primary guiding document, and then the supporting things, and that audit being one of them, can help us kind of splash a list onto the board, and then say, well, okay, then what's for this fall, and what's for next spring, and what's for the fall afterwards, just in the same way that we set our meeting schedules, out a year in advance. I mean, it's nice to plan ahead, and we've got plenty of flexibility within that. I mean, if we get something done quicker, then we can move on to something new and just pick up the next item on our list. So I like that approach, and I guess I'm kind of anxious to kind of get to that spot where we can start to look at to develop a list. So that's where I'm ready for that.
Okay. Alec.
Just had to wait for the train to pass by. I did just want to share back with the board. So at your last meeting, you had also had a discussion similar to this, where you had expressed genuine frustration that this constant 6-month timeline presents an impediment to what you described as, I think, meaningful engagement and meaningful development of these articles. The sentiment had also been expressed that, do we need the fall town meeting, or do we need to instead just focus on annual town meetings? And I do want to highlight to the board that after the last meeting, I received feedback offline from a few members of the public, 5 actually, that that was not met with positivity. The members of the constituency who approached me expressed the sentiment that they have already made this decision for you, that they wanted a fall town meeting on the books for a reason. I did encourage them to attend your meeting. Whether they choose to attend and speak up in the future is up to their discretion. But I did want to convey back that sentiment that regardless of whether you feel like you have enough time to get things ready for this fall, some members of the public feel strongly that this is what the voters wanted, was a fall town meeting. And so perhaps your time is best served preparing for next fall town meeting.
Next meeting, not this one, but
yes.
the 27 fall meeting.
Yes, I wanted to make sure, I wanted to do right by the constituency that came in, and I just wanted to share that feedback back. Again, I did encourage them to attend, but I don't know that they will.
Okay. Well, it's summer too, so.
Yeah, and I think that is a fair point of the fall town meeting exists to help expedite some planning related stuff.
Well, that was the intent.
That was the original intent.
Okay, but I mean, if the intent hasn't worked out well for us, which I don't feel it has, then, I mean, I wouldn't say we just don't comply with it. I mean, I would like to have fall town meetings that would be exclusively planning board, but it seems so. Yeah, I guess though, Alec, the way that you just put it, that makes sense to me. So if the town wants to do fall town meetings for planning articles, then we just can't, in order to get out of this death loop that we're in, we just push this fall town meeting to the minimal stuff, and then push hard to get everything onto the next fall town meeting. If we got into that cycle a year, I think that would make more sense than the 6-month cycle that we've been on. So I'm not against it. I'm willing to give it a shot, but we haven't managed that very well so far.
No, we haven't. Any other, well, so unless there's any other comment, I guess so Mark, you said kind of like, I'm ready to kind of begin on that. Where do we start? Do we start with looking at the master plan actions that we have, or do we go right back to that list of zoning articles, which kind of sends us, I almost feel like we got to look at the master plan stuff first. And then we can pull up the zoning articles and see, what did we have on the list versus what did the master plan say we should be doing? Do people agree? Mark, I see you acknowledging. Chris, does that sound, should we put up the master plan stuff and go through it? Gary, are you on board with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everything I've been told is the master plan drives our bylaw. and that's important. What I don't know, I spent time today reading the 5-year-old report. Have we made any progress of fixing, or is that the next step, is to spend a year and a half now getting that in shape?
You're
Along
talking
with a
about
few other bylaws.
Barrett, the 5-year-old,
Yes.
the Barrett report.
The Barrett report.
Yeah, others can comment on what was done. Mark, you commented that we had some stuff was integrated and there was a parking lot to put some things in, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's been a while since I cracked that open. So, I mean, I think we all need to look at it because, I mean, much as I can't remember it, you guys weren't even there for it. So we all have to kind of play catch up a little bit just to buzz through it and say, well, what's the high points? And that shouldn't be too hard. I mean, we can do that as a homework assignment, you know, it's like find the top 10 things from that report that we think should bubble up.
Could
Do with master plan though.
Could Alec, just to throw it out there, is that something we could get staff help on? Is that something Ian maybe could? It's simple enough to create a matrix of all the recommendations that came out of that: shalls, wills, mays, shoulds, and I mean, ChatGPT could create something like that in a heartbeat, and then somehow just go through which ones were integrated, which ones haven't been.
Yeah. So I would ultimately do that in reverse, but yes, that's exactly that is how I would approach it. What I would first do is I would go out and I would clear the deck of those items that were accomplished during your 2023 recodification, because that was directly born, or I should say your 2022 recodification was directly born from this zoning diagnostic report. So I would first clear the deck of those, and then of those remaining items, I could isolate the shalls versus the wills versus the may want to considers.
Okay. Yeah, if that's something that you or Ian wouldn't mind taking on, I think that would help the board. So we're just staring at what's left, right? What's within the sphere left to do.
Yep, absolutely. The other one, and this might be a two-part process. If you tell me you want this done 2 weeks from now, we can certainly do that initial investment. The other thing I would do, though, is of those remaining items, I would want to go in and I want to update the section numbers just to make sure that you're reading an up-to-date document. You're not looking back for section 9203 that no longer exists. It was renamed something totally different. That would take a little bit of time just to go back in, double-check those citations, but I could get the preliminary analysis done as early as 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I think the preliminary at least gets us as to what's still fertile ground, right? Okay. Why don't we put up the master plan stuff?
Absolutely. So for members of the public and the board, Rich did ask that I prepared this abbreviated document. For reference, this is an abridged version of the annual organizing document we issue to track action items. What we do is we isolate those items, or in this case, what I've done is I've isolated the items that have been completed. Those items would typically show up in this column G as green. It would be several columns over, but they would be green. You'll see that these are either blue or yellow or potentially white or red. Those are all items that are either in progress, constantly being done, or have been deferred. In this case, it's all constantly being done or in progress / deferred. Deferred being the yellow. The board has a total of 30 items. I will note the exact instruction I was given was to do both items where the planning board is the lead on the action item, but also if they are a supporting organization. So for example, this action item 1.142, the Water Resources Committee is the lead. The planning board is not written here, but you are a supporting board in the implementation. When all that is said and done, we eliminate the ones that are done, eliminate the action items that you're not responsible for or not affiliated with. Of the 125 in total, there are 30 remaining action items that fit that criteria and are displayed here.
Okay. Let's just kind of work through them, I guess.
Okay. Action one. So as we're reading through it, I recommend reading column E. That gives you the action item. On the right-hand side is the most recent update to that action item as of December this year. Action 1121, review existing town center zoning and design guidelines, making necessary amendments to preserve character and encourage appropriately scaled and designed developments. And this ties directly to the village center work that has been done by the Economic Development Committee, of which 2 members of the planning board have previously participated.
So the work of this really has been the work done by the EDC and the Village Center study.
That's correct, yes.
Now, that Village Center study came out with recommendations that we have, right? And it was put on a list of, I think we should, talk about Village Center overlay. I don't even know if overlay is the right way to do it, but I mean, this is a direct review existing town center zoning and design guidelines, make necessary amendments to preserve character and encourage. It's interesting how it talks about existing town center zoning. Because one of the recommendations that came out of that report was to expand town center beyond what is currently zoned specifically town center, right? So that would be a potential change.
I will also note that the design review board has met twice recently in the last month, and as part of their meetings, they have kicked off their revision process on those design guidelines, namely selecting engagement methods, which I'm now working on the timeline for, and they're starting to pursue this design guidelines section. Whether they ultimately only address the proposed B or B2 inclusion or B1 inclusion in the district or in the design guidelines is up to their discretion, but know that that is also in play. It's just not reflected in the update because they hadn't met at that time.
Yeah. So blue means what? That it's in process?
Yes, that it's in process.
Yeah. So there's been people doing things on it, but ultimately we need to get to what is town center and what's the zoning.
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we just you want to keep running? Feel free to chime in if anyone's got a comment, but that to me seems like something that's got to get on the radar, right? Or should be on the radar.
Yep. I'll plan to read through each one, pause for a second or two, and if someone on the board would like to interject with comment, feedback, please do, but otherwise I'll keep reading.
Good.
Action 1142, this is assigned to the Water Resources Committee, plan for long-term water supply and wastewater management to support private and municipal goals. As you're aware, the Water Resource Committee has been doing a long-term study, and they've been doing a lot of this work to date. You are intended to support them. You do have a liaison to that board, and by proxy, you are continuing to support that effort. You did recently hear a presentation on exactly this topic.
Yeah.
So hold on. So I just kind of want to figure out how to approach these. So plan for long-term wastewater supply and wastewater management. So is that something that we must do or other boards must do?
The lead on this is the Water Resource Committee. I also give you credit, though, that you have taken recent presentations and continue to provide a member to participate in that group.
Okay, so as far as accomplishing what's in the master plan, we have to kind of keep track of it, but it's a Water Resources Committee issue that we're saying, okay, well, they're taking care of it.
Yes.
So, okay, so there's no action for us to take on this at this point. Right.
No.
No.
In my opinion, this action item does not terminate during this master plan. However, I would expect in the next master plan, 5 years out from now, it would be entirely feasible that the Water Resources Committee moves this study process to a couple terminable action items, whether it's establish X, Y, and Z as a resource or change the zoning to accommodate A, B, and C. I would expect more actionable items while they're currently in this intensive study process for the next phase.
So, Rich, quick question either to you or Alec. So last meeting, I was assigned to be the Water Resource Committee liaison. am I a voting member or just a liaison to that committee?
Let me look back at that, Gary. I don't know off the top of my head, but I will inquire about that with Becky and make sure that we guide you appropriately.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Yep, happy to do so.
Thanks, Alec.
All right. Action 1143, review watershed and aquifer protection zoning to protect Zone 2s and existing potential well sites in Boxborough and neighboring towns. I will note that previous board member Cindy Markowitz did ask that I investigate this further when she was working with the Water Resources Committee. I have requested a scope of work from the same consultant that does our MS4 work, that's specifically stormwater discharge work. So while they're not directly wedded, ultimately the consultant came back and said, I can't do that under MS4 dollars, which of course we have set aside, but they are preparing a scope of work to review the Aquifer Protection District and the Watershed District that the Board of Health has to ensure that those are aligned properly. That scope of work is forthcoming this summer, and I'll bring that back to you as the board as to whether you wish to spend your consulting dollars on that.
Yeah. So is this a co-lead or is this Water Resources lead with the Board of Health and where support?
Let me double check real quick. I have that off to the left-hand side, so I can always review back. 1143 is all three of you are considered the lead responsibility.
Okay. All right. So so the action on this is you're coming back. Where's that stated? Do we have an action here?
Remember, as a reminder, the action or the update, so to speak, is from December, so it's not captured here. I'm sharing with you now a process I initiated about a month ago.
Okay. I just don't want to lose that thought, right? That you're going off and scoping this and you're going to come back with, okay, here's a scope for us to go assess this.
Yep. Initially, their process is to take a look at the two, kind of get a sense of how aligned or disaligned the various regulations are. And then from there, that kind of dictates, okay, what level of lift is necessary to bring them up.
Okay.
Okay. Action 1211, this is the Design Review Board with you as a supporting organization, review existing design guidelines for town center, update guidelines to consider for larger scale developments in other commercial areas. This is actively underway. As of December, we had applied for grants. However, they have kicked off this process. We've selected our public engagement methods, and I'm working with them now to kick that project further into gear.
Okay.
Action 1212, adopt and incorporate updated building design guidelines into the review process to ensure future developments are physically consistent with town character. Again, the Design Review Board, and again, I believe this is wedded to the project that's currently underway. I don't recommend any action from you at this time until the design guideline process has been completed.
Yeah.
Action 1313, when acquisition may not be feasible, work with private landowners, investors, and conservation groups to place appropriate conservation easements or agricultural restrictions on their land to ensure it remains undeveloped in perpetuity. This is one led by the ConsCom and the AgCom. You are a supporting organization. I'll also note Boxer Conservation Trust as an outside organization has participated in this for a very long time. Many of you have also heard me say that I am advocating for us to eventually move toward a conservation agent, so taking a more active role as a town as well. At this time, I don't believe there is an action item for the board to take. However, I will note I have recommended to the Open Space and Recreation Plan Working Group that's currently formed and working towards the OSRP next year. I have recommended to them that they consider the feasibility of transfer of development rights. That's a zoning tool that you would participate in, but at this time, I don't believe there's an actionable item for you.
Okay.
And I will note, if you hear me use a term that you would like a more robust presentation on, let me know. As of right now, we have flexibility in your calendar, so I'd be happy to talk about these things further at future meetings. Right. Action 3113, index commercial development opportunity sites for potential private acquisition, assembly, or development. This is the Economic Development Committee. This is a process in part through their economic development plan, which is currently underway. We've hit a small hurdle in the meantime, but that process is still underway. And I expect from that you may have an actionable item from the plan. That's just not ready to date. Action 3131, explore development of an area for a village business district and obtain property owner buy-in if necessary. This is one that I think you have taken a bit of an interest in, and I think you've done previous work. It kind of comes down to how you define the village business district. I know at one time there had been consideration in the 1414 Mass Ave region, but of course we've talked about a business gateway, we've talked about a village center district. So I think there is opportunity for cohesion and collaboration in this, if not some of the actions already underway.
Sort of ties in with the first one, but different. This is more identifying the spot, right?
That's correct. And it's very wedded to property owner buy-in, which I read as finding an area with a path of least resistance.
Yep.
All right. And then Action 3132, investigate potential zoning amendments to encourage and support appropriate development and utility support in a village business setting. Again, this is wedded to the action item above. It's under the Economic Development Committee, but I think when the previous action is a little further along at that point, we can consider these zoning amendments. So the first action is to identify the area. The second action is then to amend the zoning to tie into it. Action 3141, conduct a thorough review of the town's land use controls, including dimensional requirements, conservation bylaws on commercially zoned land, to identify barriers to growth for appropriately scaled development. I will also pause here real quick just to note, and I should have covered this earlier, but as you're reading this column E, actions that are highlighted in green as shown here, those are considered high priority action items. Those are the ones designated of you should spend time doing this specifically. There's a handful of those designated in your master plan report, and these two, as an example, 3141 and 3142, are just such. So again, conduct a thorough review of the town's land use controls, including dimensional requirements and conservation bylaws on commercially zoned land to identify barriers to growth.
So what has been done on that? Overlap of regulations in town center and passed a bylaw to clean up article that assists in the interpretation and enforcement. I'm confused. What did we do in the town center? So we
So, namely, in 2025, you passed a bylaw that gave greater flexibility on individual building sizes in the town center district. Your previous regulations forced that buildings had to be kept under a certain square footage, which would have forced disjointed buildings with further setbacks, which then would have interfered with the wetlands areas and the natural environment. It would have ultimately netted more built area as opposed to more infill style development. And further, I would contend that the changes you made most recently to your parking calcs further go in this direction as well. Now, not specifically for the town center district, it's certainly a town's land use control by which now you've reduced the parking requirements for a large number of uses that otherwise were just over the top and unnecessary.
the town center change on building size, wasn't that to accommodate public facilities?
Yes, that's a public facility, one that otherwise would have had to be broken out.
So
But again,
I guess,
as I said, I think the parking one is really your most notable, where while
Yeah.
that was born from economic development purposes, it has a great conservation benefit back to it.
too much regards to conservation bylaws on commercially zoned land to identify barriers to growth for appropriately scaled development. I guess, what do we need to do on this? I mean, this is a high priority one, and I understand we did the parking thing, and I understand we got the firehouse thing addressed. But what do we, if this is a priority item, what do we need to do? Board members, what are your thoughts on this?
Rich, I can also offer some suggestions on this if you'd like.
Sure.
So when we did the parking calcs, we explicitly discussed revising other parking calculations. You only did business uses last time, so there are certainly other parking calcs that you could consider that by reducing would have a greater environmental impact. The other really common one to consider is whether you could increase height availability in certain areas, which ultimately allows for things to be built up as opposed to being built out. And that's the number one conflict you have in these environmentally sensitive areas. The further the smaller you make the buildings, the more you have to build out to make your bottom line dollar, which ultimately impacts the natural environment more. If I'm looking for low hanging fruit, I would look for requirements that would potentially allow flexibility to build up and further reducing those parking requirements. And those are things that can be done in short order.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably some simple things we can think of, but is there a broader, I don't know, this feels like there's more to it than just the words on the page, right? Like, do we look at setbacks? Do we achieve something by allowing lesser setback, but require less, do something with the floor area ratio or something to sort of ease the pain in that way.
Yeah. If you're looking for a more informed response, the other option is we could take a sample size of the last, let's call it 25, 50 Wetlands Protection Act filings in front of the Conservation Commission, and we could do a simple diagnostic of what triggered this, why was it triggered, and what could we do differently in the zoning to avoid triggering this in the future.
Okay.
Action 3142, consider regulatory tools that can guide and encourage growth in appropriate areas, such as incentive zoning overlays for floor area ratio density, density bonuses for developments that incorporate affordable housing, agricultural, or open space. I had tagged this back in December. This may be explored in the upcoming economic development plan, but has not been addressed to date. The Economic Development Committee has this action item. You heard me use the term earlier, transfer development rights would be an example of one of these tools, and I have asked the OSRP working group to look into it. When we get further in the Economic Development Plan, I will also ask the EDC to look into it. And again, I can give you a presentation in the future on that. It's a pretty comprehensive tool, but I do think it would be an effective method to addressing this action item in particular. 3151, invest in public infrastructure in commercial areas to attract private development. We referenced the grant award for the economic development plan, and this would be an area specifically explored in the plan, very typical of an economic development plan, namely identifying what infrastructure is needed in your commercial districts to spur new growth or investment. Action 3152, engage in public-private partnerships to stimulate appropriate forms of development and redevelopment on key opportunity sites. Again, pointing back to the Economic Development Plan. 3213, identify target industries to market development incentives and land use policies to attract and retain business. Again, pointing back to the Economic Development Plan. Both of these last two are goals of the Economic Development Plan. 3226, review town policies and regulations and amend as necessary to ensure clarity and consistency of agricultural use definitions. This one sits with the Agricultural Commission, but you are tagged in it. The AgCom has not found any issues with the agricultural use definitions to date. excuse me, but it continues to review town policies and regulations. I will note, you might remember this past winter, I had proposed a potential revision. I had agreed to go back to the AgCom and first discuss it with them. We have overall been working to onboard the Land Use and Permitting Office as staff support for the Agricultural Commission. So I think we'll be continuing to develop that relationship, and we'll have more on this to come in the future, but I don't think there's an immediate action for the board at this time.
Okay.
All right, 3412. Again, we're getting into a high priority action. Incorporate low impact design guidelines into the development review process. You did not commence this in 2025, but MS4 remains an active funding mechanism to support implementation in the coming year. When I say that, what I reference is if there are certain low impact design guidelines you would like to explore further, if they are stormwater related, as an example of low impact, that can be paid for through S4. You also do maintain your own consulting budget. So if you would like to bring in a presenter on one of these tools or techniques, and I can give you a list of tools and techniques, then you can use your consulting budget to retain that initial presentation, and from there decide if you want to explore it further.
What is MS4?
Municipals. Oh, I'm gonna get it wrong. Hold on. It is the
Oh, municipal separate storm sewer system or something, right?
Yep, that is correct. And for you, that explicitly ties into a handful of culverts. So you are an MS4 community, not because of public sewer, which is a separate system. You don't have that, but you do have a variety of culverts and discharges. So you'll remember this board has in the past undertaken the pre and post construction stormwater permit. You developed that as a permit type, and it has been utilized to date. We've had a couple filings of that, and we have been enforcing that in the past through the building department to support you. So that was an example of a tool that achieved this objective, but was not necessarily envisioned at the time of this adoption.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused. So MS4 is stormwater, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
So are there grants available? Is that what you're talking about? Or is there a fund? I'm missing something here.
You'll remember each year at town meeting, we budget a portion of money set aside for MS4 related work. That's our annual report. And then a variety of other things. For example, we've done conditions assessments, and we routinely evaluate our MS4 system. Those are those culverts that I'm referencing by which we handle the discharge from our public ways. That's an example of it. As you get further into it, so if you spend your money for a little bit of study work, there are grants available for further exercises and efforts to implement these things. A successful next step would be if I worked with our consultant to prepare a preliminary list of these low impact design guidelines. And then from there, if any of them resonate with the board or the public and you choose to pursue them, we could then consider grant dollars to execute on some of those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And I don't want to hamstring you to just considering MS4. There are several other low impact design styles, like transfer development rights that I seem to keep mentioning here, that would fit this criteria as well. So I can do a more comprehensive list than just MS4 if the board would be interested. All right, jumping back into it. Next item, revisit subdivision regulations regarding roadway widths and amend as appropriate. The police and the fire departments have continued to provide feedback when appropriate on roadways, private, public, or driveways. But otherwise, we have not taken a substantial look at this as of late.
What was the minimized development by protecting towns? So the idea would be to limit roadway width? this seems like a very pointed thing. Like a lot of these are conduct a land use study, conduct, like this one is like, we got a roadway width problem.
Let's take a look back. Bear with me while I scroll to it.
Not that there's a ton of subdivisions happening, but
To your point, I don't see why it's part of the water supply and managing stormwater. Doesn't seem like it fits.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you as your planner. I don't know that these are, well, in some way, shape, or form, they were aligned. At the time, the town said this is directly wedded to it, but it doesn't give me clear enough guidance. So I would need to go into your actual report, not just the action items that I have off to this side. I would need to go into the full master plan and read back on this a little bit to give you more context.
It might be, Gary, that the police and fire want wider everything, and that's and
No,
then,
I fully understand why the fire trucks need to be able to make a turn. on a
but what's it have to
cul-de-sac.
do with stormwater? It's impervious surfaces and drainage and runoff on the roadways. So I think that's why they get linked in here, because if you want to minimize that kind of activity, then you make things narrower, not wider. So you got to balance the two, I guess, and that's what the only thing I can think of for why it's there.
Okay.
Yeah, I will note that you are the lead on this action item, but both the DPW and the fire department are considered coordinated with, so they're your secondaries on this. It may be of value to specifically reach out, contact them, and solicit feedback on their perspective on it. I also
I
do want to
think
read a little further.
Mark said it well. I think that police and fire want wide. This is in the action of limiting impact, minimizing impact, and the two actions are incorporate low impact design and revisit subway widths, subdivision road widths. So it sounds like on the strategy side, town, the master plan committee was trying to minimize impact, and you talk to police and fire, they may want to to make it
Maximize it.
Right. So there may be a push and pull there. I'm trying to understand, like, what is it? Like, it sounds like at one point somebody thought we had to address maybe roadway widths were perceived to be wide. I mean, you drive down my street and you'll say, well, that's a very wide road. You drive down other streets and it's like not as wide. And are we trying to address something here? Maybe.
I will also note, I would not presume that the police and fire departments want wider roadways. In many cases, we as municipal officials will actually propose a more narrow roadway for better traffic calming purposes. Alternatively, too, you might find that a wider road width in some areas would actually allow for better pitching towards the center and better control of water runoff as opposed to immediate dumping. So I think there is more kind of learning and facilitation to be done here. As to what the appropriate action would be.
Well, I guess in as much as it has to do with stormwater and drainage, we're in charge of the permitting aspects of that, but doesn't that emanate from like conservation rules and regs?
No, roadway width is born. So I would say roadway width is born predominantly from your subdivision rules and regs. You set the standard. Now, of course, subdivision rules and regs, you can waive some of those, you can modify them as necessary, but more often than not, a subdivision road first comes to your standards, and then from there is only modified if it can't meet it for an environmental purpose. And so you really set the playbook in that regard.
Well, it's a good question to our engineer. There's like, what could we be doing better in these respects? These low impact design guidelines, subdivision regs regarding roadways, widths. mean, that'd be an interesting question to put to Sue.
Yeah, that would be.
I will note there is a cost associated with that, but if the board is willing to commit a portion of their budget, she could do a review of that and provide feedback.
Do we have a record? We must, of all the subdivisions and the roadway widths. That might be a data collection.
Yep,
thing
I have those.
Has that it might be good to understand, like, well, what's our current state?
Well, I mean, again, the words there are nice sounding words, but I'm trying to understand what they mean to us.
Yep.
As a regulatory body ascribed as lead on this thing. So I'm just, so, you know, I'd say have an engineer, and why they appear here, just like Gary was asking, well, why is that here under stormwater and runoff when it's not someplace else? So I'm a little bit, maybe school me is I guess I wouldn't mind having a little 15-minute spiel from Sue.
Okay.
Okay.
Keep trucking.
All right, 3431, explore the potential use of regulatory tools such as transfer of development rights, natural resource protection zoning, or payment in lieu of taxes programs to support open space preservation and affordable housing development in the town's agricultural residential zoning districts. Again, this was tagged as high priority. You've heard me reference transfer of development rights as something I do think should be explored, and I've advised 2 other groups to explore. I'm happy to give a presentation to you, the board, on that, but this also references other tools in the toolbox as well. So I would look for some guidance from this board as to whether you want to get skilled up on transfer of development rights and set yourself a place at the table as the ConsCom, the EDC, the AgCom, the RecCom are talking about this, or if you'd like to pursue one of these other tools in the interim.
This kind of ties into one of the suggestions in the Barrett report is open space residential development.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Provide floor area ratio density bonuses for commercial and housing development that incorporates an active agricultural management or open space preservation in their overall development.
What's the, we've not explored this and it's not, may no longer be part of the strategy. Was there a decision?
The last few times that this has been reviewed, we have just tagged it as unaddressed or not something actively before the board. I will note that you did incorporate the sustainability committee in your review process, and the DRB is there as well, but that otherwise this one has not been addressed.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but this ties in with the one right above. I mean, this is a way to preserve land, right? You increase density and you do open space, residential, commercial development. We just approved an open space commercial development permit.
Yep. So what I would reference is, what I would identify is this action item immediately before it identifies a few optional tools, but then the immediately following action item that I just read off doesn't just say consider these, it says implement one of them. So to date, we have not implemented one, although we are discussing at least one of them and reviewing them, albeit at a different.
Let me do this. Let me just take a time check, because we're at the time, not to be a slave to my agenda here, but we're at 8:50, which is kind of where I said we wanted to get to. How far are we on that list, Alec?
You are on action item. You have, that's 21. So hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7.
Halfway down.
12 more action items to go. You are about 2/3 of the way there.
For planning board, how many of those 12 are ours? Is it worth just skimming real quick? Can we get a quick skim done so we can?
You are the lead on almost all of the remaining ones.
Can we just do a quick skim and not dive in on each one? Just see what.
We can do that.
just kind of skim it so we can kind of like put it, you know,
Okay.
sort of
For reference,
across the- yeah.
I will only read them. I will not pause in between more than a second just to catch my breath, and I will only read the ones that you are the lead on.
Great.
Great. 6123, prioritize senior housing needs such as accessibility features in the permitting and development of all multifamily development projects. 6124, analyze the prevalence of teardowns in Boxborough to determine if the demolition of existing single-family homes is contributing to the limited supply of homeownership opportunities for moderate income households. 6141, review the town zoning bylaw land use controls, including quadrangle requirements, to better understand how this requirement affects development potential of oddly shaped but otherwise suitable land parcels. 6142, identify barriers to multifamily development, including use and intensity restrictions in the town zoning bylaw as a means to support housing options in Boxborough. 6143, analyze the efficacy of accessory dwelling units, both attached and detached, as a means to meet affordable needs in Boxborough. Review bylaw language as well as units that have been constructed since the bylaw was enacted to determine if amendments are necessary to expand its use. 6151, identify barriers to universal inclusive design and existing zoning bylaws and amend as necessary. Action 7112, develop a prioritized plan for new sidewalks and bicycle infrastructure to connect schools, recreational resources, shopping and dining, commuter rail, and residential areas. Include input from residents, businesses, and regional organizations in the plan. 7113, implement the 2003 Economic Development Trail Master Plan along Route 111 and Mass Ave. And that's all that you are the lead on.
Any, for the whole board, any prevailing themes, thoughts, comments as we kind of rifled through this?
How did we arrive at the green? The ranking basically more important than the other things, Alec?
The Master Planning Committee set that in developing their document. And so the committee, through public engagement and analysis, determined those to be the most important.
In the last pass at that was how long ago?
2015, at which point the planning board then adopted the plan.
Okay, so
over a decade.
11 years ago. So if we decide to cherry pick these, we might find that some of these may be less or more obvious today than they were then. Low impact design guidelines. I guess that's, well, I don't know, Rich. I mean, I want to circle back to this. Maybe we come back and kind of all cherry pick the stuff that we think is the most important in the green. I mean, Alec, you just read a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't in the green. So, but everything where the planning board is listed as the lead, maybe we should condense the list to just the stuff where we're listed as the lead. That helps us narrow our focus.
Yeah. I had told Alec to expand it to include the stuff that we're not the lead on, but as you look at the total list, it's big. So you're right. Like let's take care of our own house first, right?
Well, again, because in order to get to the goal setting phase, you're going to have to kind of narrow. We're going to have to narrow this down. I mean, You're going to take an axe to this. So
for reference, if I narrow it to just the ones you're the lead for, that takes it from 30 to 12 action items. And if I then just do the ones highlighted in green as the most important, that is 6 action items.
No, I'd go to the 12.
Yeah.
Because the green was set, 11 years ago. So I want to take a second look at that. But where were the active ones? Why don't we do that? I think that'll be a little more focusing for me.
Yeah, if Alec, you could do that. I know it sounds tedious, but if you could just, here's maybe filter it out, put a filter in, and here's all the planning board ones. And then I don't know if you want to put it back in the packet as an after action item so we can go back to the packet to pull that, and then we can all do our own, sort of thought on it. That in combination, I'll open it up again, but while we're on the trail of getting to an action, that in combination with that assessment on the Barrett study to see what's already been mapped and then what's hanging. There may be some overlap, there may not be, but I do agree with you, Mark. I think we got to get to it's not that we can't do it all, it's a matter of when. So we really need to get to a point of being able to plan and schedule out, plan and schedule it all out, right? Like, I mean, some of this stuff, we need to get to town meeting in the fall. Some of this stuff, maybe we have to get to an annual town meeting. Maybe we bypass annual town meeting if that's the feedback. And we're like, okay, there's some other things we can get to the next fall town meeting. There might be things that we have on our list that, we're not going to get till, 28 fall meeting, but that's okay. That's okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'll open it. So if we can filter that, put it in the after action packet, and then take the action on the Barrett study to, identify which ones have already been addressed, which ones are still hanging.
Yep. I've already done the filtering just now. That was pre-applied, but I just did it. I'll forward this to the board. And if members of the public would like to do the same, you can download this immediately from the Dropbox packet and filter from there, or I can help you with it if you ask.
Okay. Any other thoughts on what we just heard? All right. I guess what I'd like to do is we think we gotta do like a, either we're gonna chip at this, maybe we chip at this at the next meeting, or we might get to a point where it's like, okay, we need to, no kidding, have a planning session, right? Where we're just doing nothing but whiteboarding this stuff and coming up with a plan. And maybe that's sometime, I don't know, we have a meeting at the end of July, and then we have a public hearing that's going to be in August. Maybe it's sometime in August we can find the time, or maybe it actually, we do our planning session early September, but we're going to have things that are going into public hearing before that. It's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
So there might be some low-hanging fruit of things that we know that we want to address sooner than later, so we can start the public hearings for that.
Yeah.
We're still nailing down the rest.
So maybe for the next meeting, we can, we'll all have thought about it, and we can kind of go at the planning board specific items. And then maybe we need to have, what are the low hanging fruit items that we believe there's a sense of urgency to get to annual town meeting or fall town meeting with. And Alec, if you can, is it in the you have in the packet the list of articles, future articles?
That's not included in this packet, but I can bring that back and forward that out.
Okay, yeah, I think if you forward that, so for the next meeting, we'll bring back the filtered list, and then everybody's thought about it. We can have a discussion on those 12, and we should talk about which specific things are urgent for fall town meeting, so we can get hearings posted.
I mean, did anything on this last list stand out to you as something for fall town meeting? Because nothing struck me really, other than to open the door maybe to something, but not to close the door on something.
Yeah, I was looking more at themes, right? Like there's a town center theme, which is, the current zoning in town center, what's the village district, and what are the amendments we want to make to bring all that to life. That's kind of one theme. The other was land use controls, inhibitors to growth. And the other was lowering the impact of design. And that also included like how we, land use controls, and do we look at higher, lower impact design, meaning higher density but less land use. Those were the themes that kind of came out for me. I didn't see anything that was like a low-hanging fruit thing. If I could say just make every subdivision street, 15 feet wide, and if that was a good thing, yeah, maybe there's low-hanging fruit there. But I don't know that makes any sense at all, because a lot of this stuff needs some review and study. I do like the idea of having Sue come to a meeting to talk about low impact design.
Yeah, because we have so much wetland. Because I can just there was a complete streets like survey that I saw come around. Thinking about trying to, get sidewalk from the corner of Mass Ave and Liberty Square, where it currently goes from Blanchard and the library, all the way up to Liberty Field, which would be great. But there's bits of the road that it's wetland on either side. Like there's a bridge here and it's soaked, or where there isn't really enough room. To widening the road would be great, but you really can't because it's like a cliff on each end. And, things like that.
What do we do to bring Sue in for a discussion on this? We don't have to necessarily have it next meeting, but that's something we would just work with her schedule and line up. That's a discussion. I mean, is that something we have to appropriate, or do we have the ability to bring her in for a discussion?
We can bring her in pretty easy. I would say, just to be safe, why don't you authorize the expense of up to $500 from your consulting budget? You're not going to touch the full 500 to just bring her in for a half hour. I just can't remember off the top of my head what her hourly rate is, but I can give her stuff to look at for half an hour. She can come in for half an hour. And Rich, you and I can talk offline and just kind of highlight to her, I think these are the things the board wants you to look into.
Right. You're just going to have to get a list together for her of things to kind of be ready to speak to.
Yep.
I don't think that would be too hard.
All right. Do you need a?
Could I get a motion to authorize expense of up to $500 for consulting time with Sue Carter?
So move.
Second.
All right. Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Just to confirm, Sue is from Places. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you'll get to know Sue real well. Gary.
Yep.
Is she the one that presented last week about Toll Brothers?
Yes.
Yep.
Was that a different person?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay. As I see you, Chris Dowdy,
Dowdy, aye.
Mark White,
White eye.
Gary Kushner,
Kushner, aye.
and Gazardi, aye. Okay. That motion carries unanimously. All right. So I think we got that licked. Anything else on this agenda topic before we move on? No, I am going to move to administrative business. I'm going to take that out of order and come back to hybrid meetings. So we have minutes for approval, June 15th, 2026. Alec, you want to pull them up?
And I do have a question on line 93.
Okay.
I did not understand the site looks like an asphalt batching plant in this area. I didn't know whether that was a spelling areas or if that really meant that.
Kristen, if you wouldn't mind just going back and double checking the recording just to make sure that this is captured correctly. I assume this is captured verbatim, but if not, just make an amendment real quick.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the June 15th, 2026 minutes.
So move.
I'll second.
All right. Moved by Mark White, seconded by Gary Kushner. All those in favor, as I see you, Chris Dowdy,
Dowdy, aye.
Mark White,
White eye.
Gary Kushner,
Kushner, aye.
and Gazardi, aye. Okay, that motion carries. Planners report.
All right, I do have a few things, so just bear with me. I want to make everyone aware, we are doing a little bit of what I call in-service training. Over the last couple weeks, Rich and I have had a couple of phone calls to talk about the review process, how we process applications. And we're both in agreement that there's some work that can be done in-house to make sure these things are streamlined and a little bit better the way they're presented and brought forward to you. So I'm working with my team, both department heads who provide feedback and review, as well as my fellow planners and department staff to figure out the most refined process for this. This dovetails into a concerted effort as well to continue skilling up Ian Gilson, your associate town planner. As I referenced earlier, over the course of the next year, he is going to be taking a more active role in your application process, whereas I'm going to be predominantly engaged in your policy making process. That shift is going to happen gradually over time, but I expect that in your upcoming public hearings, whenever they may happen for applications specifically, you're going to see a refined, expedited, and better process, candidly. I'm looking forward to doing that. That's the kind of work I became a director of land use specifically to do. I want to make sure these things come to you clearly, concisely, and that they give you the best opportunity for success. I'm going to skip over that one because we don't need to do it, and I'm going to give you a heads up. So I did receive communication from Attorney Costa earlier today. I'll be sharing that back out with the board shortly. It's regarding 244 Adams Place. He's requested an opportunity to sit and discuss with me first. As you remember, that is an active parcel of litigation, both for you and the Zoning Board of Appeals. Once I've had an opportunity to touch base with him, as well as the two chairs of the board, I will then be asking for an executive session. I will note he's given me his schedule ahead of time, and he has said that July 20th is available to him. That is your regularly scheduled meeting in 2 weeks from tonight. So in all likelihood, you will see an executive session listed first on your agenda. At least that's my recommendation to the chair. But you will hear more from me later this week in regards to that. I just wanted to make you all aware of that, if at all possible. And I think everyone had confirmed that meeting date, but please make yourself available at 7 o'clock specifically, because I do believe we'll have an executive session.
Okay.
Otherwise, that's all I have for planners report.
All right. Thank you. Any recently received correspondence?
Nothing aside from notices.
Okay. Community reports, only if you have something. Community Preservation Committee.
Next meeting is in August.
Okay. Design Review Board is Rebecca. Alec, you've commented on that. Economic Development Committee, planning is underway for Village for a Day, which will be, I think it's the first weekend in October. Is that right, Alec? Oh, help me out.
So
I keep, yeah, it's on my calendar, but, so we're looking to basically do what we did last year, but take the input and the improvements and make them. And it's really about bringing the village together and the businesses that reside in the village together that day. So anyway, that's ongoing. Magic.
Next meeting is tomorrow morning.
All right. Water Resources Committee, Gary. We'll let you know what you can do.
I did let Les know that I'm the primary and that Than is my backup.
Okay, great. And then Boxborough Leadership Forum. I did have a discussion with the chair of the select board, and I think he's thinking there will be a Boxborough Leadership Forum meeting September, October timeframe is what he's thinking. So, and that was going to be discussed with the planning board. I'm sorry, with the select board. Okay. And then the next, before we do upcoming meetings, I guess let's go back to, is that everything for administrative business, Alec? Did I cover everything?
Yes, I will note, and I should have said this during the planner's report, I took the calendar, the Excel spreadsheet we made of various ones, and I converted it into a physical calendar that was provided to the board. It is also in your packet, and within the week, it'll be uploaded to your webpage as well, but makes it very convenient for you to keep track of applications and such.
Yeah, and if you'll notice in the upcoming planning board meetings, July 20th, you'll see that I've tried to sketch out like sort of key topics for that meeting, like goal setting. I had anticipated we'd be at an MBTA communities hearing on Monday, August 3rd. And then there's potential fire station discussion, although it sounds like that may push out from August 17th. So just trying to kind of keep track of what a meeting might consist of. All right, back to hybrid meetings discussion. So this topic is feedback that this board has received multiple times from the public during the public comment period, in a request for this board to get back to in-person or in-person hybrid meetings. Gary, I'm sorry, your hand's up. You waiting for me to finish, or you have a point of order?
Well, I like this discussion, but I'm really wondering whether we should have it without Rebecca here and have all 5 of us in place.
Yeah. I mean, let me tee up what the discussion is, and then you're right. We should have it with five members in place. But it has to do with the feedback that we received at the opening of many of our meetings. And, I guess and then the question really becomes, what does that look like? Is that, do we just go ahead and say we're now in person? Do we say we're not making any change? We're doing exactly what we're doing. We're going to do it in hybrid option. We're going to try something and pilot it. So this discussion really is around that. And aside from there being feedback we've received, these were specific questions that were asked during the League of Women Voters, and I know that has been a topic across across the community. Some of the other part of the feedback is that there are certain members of the community that just don't participate in Zoom meetings. They go into town hall to participate, and that's the way they're most comfortable. Anyway, I do agree having 5 members here to have the discussion. Chris, that said, you did raise your hand, so I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, point taken with there's some folks who don't want to deal with, talking to a dot and like staring at a little box. They'd rather be in person. And there's also the flip side of that. There's people that are like, got little kids, and I just put them down, but they could wake up screaming at any moment. So I need to be physically here. So in order for them to engage, it need to be remote, at least hybrid. So I would argue for hybrid. I can make the effort to be there in person. There's going to be times that I have other commitments that require me, like traveling or whatever. I might not be in the state, but I can still participate from a hotel room or wherever. So happy to give it a go. If it goes to like 12:30 on some evenings, then I might insist on not being physically there to not wake everybody up. Make the dog panic when I get home. But yeah, there's arguments to be made for doing it that way. Definitely.
Dog doesn't know it's you?
Oh, he does, but the garage door opening, he's just gonna freak out then he'll realize, oh, okay, it's you, and he'll calm down, but he's loud. So
and Gary, just we're not making any decisions tonight, right? So this is a discussion, and we'll have this discussion again with. I know all of a sudden I'm seeing. I wanted to tee it up, and all of a sudden I see hands up. So I want to. But Mark, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to keep it high level. So what Chris just said is I get both sides of it. And I think the question isn't that we would go to an only town meeting live format. I think it's clear that the public, I would say the majority of the public, prefers online access. So I think the options here are either hybrid, which means we can be either in the room or not, or we just keep it the way that it is, which means we don't go into town hall unless there's something special. And I think those are really the way I see our options on the table right now, because what the option really isn't on the table for not being in a Zoom meeting. So,
right.
So hybrid, I think, will work for the people who don't want to be there and work for the people who want to be there. So I'm not going to speak to my predilection here at this point. I'll wait till Rebecca's here. So I just want to make sure that people didn't think that we were thinking to make it in person only.
Yep, that's good input. Okay, so unless there's a hand up, I'm going to defer the rest of the discussion to, unless somebody from the public wants to make a comment, which I'll take here for a moment. No. Okay. I'll defer this discussion. We'll put it on our next agenda item when we have a full house. I think that concludes our agenda. I will, Alec, am I missing anything?
Nope, I think you're all set.
All right. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Moved by Mark White, seconded by Chris Downey. That motion is not debatable. Vote as I see you. Mark White,
White eye.
Chris Downey,
Dowdy, aye.
Gary Kushner,
Kushner, aye.
and Gazzardi, aye. Okay, great.